You were not born distracted. That is the first thing I need you to understand. You were not born scrolling. You were not born fragmenting your hours into someone else's content. You were not born half present in your own life, chasing signals that were manufactured to move you. You were born with a center. And then the world spent the next 20, 30, 40 years systematically removing it. I want to be careful here. I am not talking about some vague conspiracy. I am talking about economics. The attention economy is not a metaphor. It is a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure built with one purpose: to take your attention off yourself and redirect it outward, toward products, toward opinions, toward other people's lives, toward manufactured emergencies that require your emotional energy and return nothing. Every notification is a small displacement. Every scroll is a small displacement. Every hour spent in passive consumption is a small displacement. And displacement compounds, just like interest. The person who loses 30 minutes a day to distraction does not lose 30 minutes. Over a year, they lose 182 hours. Over a decade, they lose 7.5 weeks of waking, functioning life. To what? To nothing they chose. The people of Kemet understood something about architecture that we have forgotten. They did not build toward the horizon. They built from a fixed point. The temples at Karnak were oriented with precision. The obelisks did not point randomly at the sky. They were aligned. Everything radiated outward from a center. That is what a life built on the feather core looks like. But most people have never been taught to build from a center. They have only been taught to build toward things, toward goals, toward approval, toward what the world told them to want. The first step is recognizing that the displacement is not an accident. It was designed. I want to talk about physics for a moment. Not because this is a science channel, because physics describes something that most self-help language cannot. A gyroscope is a spinning disc. When you hold it in your hand and try to push it off its axis, it resists. Not because it is rigid, not because it is fighting you. It resists because it has a center of gravity, a point around which all its motion organizes. The harder you push, the more it stabilizes. Now think about a person with no center. You push them, they move. You praise them, they change direction. You criticize them, they change direction again. You show them what other people are doing, they pivot. They are not moving forward, they are oscillating, endlessly responsive to every external force. This is not weakness in the ordinary sense. Some of these people are highly intelligent. Many of them are extremely hard-working, but they have no center of gravity. Every input is as valid as every other input. Every external force has equal access to their direction. A center of gravity is not an opinion. It is not a morning routine. It is not a set of values written in a journal. A center of gravity is a structural property of who you are. It is the thing that, when pressure is applied, causes you to return to yourself rather than drift further from yourself. It is the thing that makes you more yourself under difficulty, not less. Most people become less themselves under difficulty. They contract, they perform, they chase reassurance, they borrow someone else's answer because they have not built their own. The people of Kemet called the center Maat, truth, balance, the principle that holds the cosmos in order, not as an abstraction, as a lived practice. The heart was weighed against the feather of Maat at the moment of judgment, because what mattered was not what you accumulated, but what you remained. what you remained when the pressure came, what you remained when no one was watching, what you remained when the world offered you a reason to become something else. That is a center of gravity. That is what the feather core is built to protect. Let me tell you exactly what the feather core is. It is not a habit. Habits are behaviors. Behaviors can be built and broken. The feather core is an architecture, a structural arrangement of who you are that sits beneath behavior, beneath emotion, beneath circumstance. It is not a mindset. Mindsets shift. You can have a growth mindset on Monday and a scarcity mindset by Thursday if the week is hard enough. A mindset is a setting. The feather core is the operating system beneath the settings. It is not a goal. Goals have endpoints. The feather core does not end. It deepens. It becomes more precise. It becomes denser with time, the way iron becomes steel. Goals are things you reach for. The feather core is the thing you build from. Here's the simplest way I can put it. Your feather core is the accumulated depth of all the time you have spent in genuine contact with yourself, thinking your own thoughts, feeling what you actually feel, not what you are performing for an audience, working on the things that actually matter to you, not the things you have been convinced should matter to you. Every hour of real solitude adds to it. Every hour of deliberate focus adds to it. Every moment you chose your own signal over the noise of the world added to it. Every time you were honest with yourself about what you actually wanted, not what you were supposed to want, you built something. And conversely, every hour of passive consumption, every hour of performance, every hour of chasing what the world told you to chase, that was not neutral. That was erosion. The feather core does not stay the same when you neglect it. It thins. The gyroscope loses its spin. The center loses its density. And you become more displaceable, more reactive, more anxious, more susceptible to external pressure. This is why the question is not, how do I become more productive? The question is, what is your inner architecture and who is building it? Most people think distraction is an interruption. You are trying to work, a notification appears. You look, you lose your thread, you return, productivity lost. That is not how distraction works. Distraction is displacement. There is a difference. An interruption is temporary. You recover and return. Displacement changes where you are. It shifts your center of reference, and after enough displacement, you no longer know where your center was, or if you ever had one. Here is what sustained distraction actually does to a person. It trains them to be oriented outward. After years of checking the phone, checking the feed, checking what other people think, checking for signals of approval or disapproval, the nervous system learns that the important information is always outside, that the relevant data is always external, that the internal signal is not worth trusting because the external one comes faster and feels louder. This is the real damage. Not the lost hours, though those are real. Not the broken focus, though that is real too. The real damage is that the person loses the habit of interior reference. They stop consulting themselves. They stop noticing what they actually think before looking for what others think. They stop feeling what they actually want before measuring it against what is socially approved. They become, in a precise sense, externally referenced. And an externally referenced person is the most displaceable thing there is. The people of Kemet built their civilization on an internally referenced cosmology. The gods of Kemet were not arbitrary. They were the structural principles of existence turned inward. Tahuti was not just a deity of writing. Tahuti was the principle of inner knowing, the capacity to know truth without requiring external confirmation. That is what distraction erodes, not your time, not your attention, your capacity to know yourself without checking. I want to draw a line here that a lot of people miss. There is a difference between isolation and calibration. Isolation is withdrawal. It is shutting the world out because the world is threatening. It is solitude as a defense. It has a quality of fear in it, the sense that if you engage, you will be overwhelmed. Isolation makes you smaller. It is reactive. It is chosen not from strength, but from the need to escape. Calibration is completely different. Calibration is solitude as a precision tool. It is deliberate time alone, not to avoid the world, but to ensure that when you re-enter it, you are still yourself. It is time used to hear your own signal without interference, to return to your center, to re-establish what you actually think, what you actually want, what you are actually building. The difference is not always visible from the outside. Two people sitting alone in a room, one is hiding, one is building. But the person who is building knows why they are there. They are not seeking escape, they are seeking precision. A surgeon does not rest between operations because surgery is too much to handle. A surgeon rests between operations to ensure that the hand that picks up the blade next time is steady. The calibration serves the engagement. The solitude sharpens the contact. This is the feather framework for solitude. Not retreat, not withdrawal, not the rejection of the world. Precision time alone, structured with intention, used to ensure that when you move from your own center. Most people treat solitude as a luxury, something they might get to on a weekend retreat if life slows down enough, if the schedule permits. The feather framework treats solitude as infrastructure. You do not earn it, you build it in, because without it, everything you do in the world is slightly displaced, slightly reactive, slightly built on someone else's frequency, and slightly displaced, held long enough, becomes completely lost. There is a version of this conversation happening in a lot of places online. Self-focus as a weapon. Prioritize yourself to win. Use your inner development to get ahead of others. I understand why that framing resonates. Competition is real. The world does reward focus. But that framing has a ceiling. A weapon is a tool. It is good at one thing. It can be confiscated. It can be turned. It depends on having an enemy. And when the battle is over, or when there is no visible enemy, the weapon sits idle. The person who built themselves as a weapon does not know what to do with themselves in peace. The feather core is not a weapon. It is leverage. Leverage is different. Leverage is structural. Leverage means that every unit of effort produces more output because of the position you built from. A person with a strong feather core does not just work harder than others, they work differently. They are operating from a fixed point that others are still trying to locate. The compounding works like this. Every hour you spend in genuine self-focus, building your inner architecture, developing your real capabilities, clarifying your actual values, that hour increases the quality of every subsequent hour. because the person doing the next hour's work is more precise, more grounded, more capable of distinguishing signal from noise. An externally referenced person does their best work when conditions are perfect, when the feedback is good, when the environment is stable, when people are watching. A person with a built feather core does their best work in exactly the conditions where the externally referenced person falls apart. In uncertainty, in silence, in the absence of approval. This is leverage. Not because you have become harder or colder, but because you have built something that does not require external conditions to function. The return compounds. Every year of genuine interior work builds a person who is exponentially less dependent on external validation, external motivation, external structure. And that independence is, in the precise economic sense, leverage. The people of Kemet did not build the great structures of Kemet in reaction to other civilizations. They built from an interior cosmology, from an inner architecture that made the external output possible. That is the sequence. Inner architecture first, external output follows, not the other way. Let me talk about validation for a moment, because this is where a lot of people, including people doing serious inner work, lose their center without realizing it. Validation feels good. There is no shame in acknowledging that. When someone recognizes your work, when someone confirms your direction, when someone reflects back to you that you are on the right path, it feels stabilizing. But here is the problem. If you need validation to feel stable, you have outsourced your calibration. And the person who has outsourced their calibration does not actually have a feather core. They have an assembly that looks like a center of gravity, but depends on external inputs to maintain its spin. Test this honestly. When you produce something, a piece of work, a decision, an act of integrity that no one else will ever know about, do you feel settled in it? Or does some part of you need to know that someone else agrees? The need to know that someone else agrees is not a sign of community or connection. It is a sign that your calibration point is external. And an external calibration point means you can only be as accurate as your audience. Your audience, whether it is social media, your social circle, your family, your colleagues, is not aligned with your actual trajectory. They are aligned with their own comfort, their own projections, their own sense of what is possible or appropriate. When you calibrate against them, you calibrate against their ceiling. The feather core is an internal calibration instrument. It does not ask for confirmation. It checks against a personal standard that you have built, refined, and deepened over time through honest self-contact. This does not mean you stop listening to others. It means you stop letting others be the final word on your own direction. There is a difference between receiving input and requiring validation. Input is data. You weigh it. You decide what to do with it. Validation is a dependency. You are not weighing it, you are waiting for it. You are not whole without it. The feather core does not wait. It has already done its own accounting. The world right now has a confusion at its center. It has confused visibility with power. The loudest voices, the largest followings, the most coverage, the most recognition. In the current cultural moment, these things look like power. They are treated as power, and so people, Intelligent, motivated people pour their lives into building visibility rather than building actual capacity. But visibility and power are not the same thing. They are not even close. Visibility is dependent. It requires an audience. It requires continuous maintenance. An audience that is not fed will leave. A platform that is not refreshed will fade. Visibility is a river that dries up the moment you stop feeding it. Power, real power, structural power, is independent. A person with a genuine feather core does not need continuous visibility to maintain their effectiveness. Their capacity exists whether or not anyone is watching. Their direction holds whether or not anyone approves. Think about the people who have had the most lasting influence on you. Not the most entertaining, not the most viral, the ones who actually change something in how you think or how you live. Most of them were not performing for you. They were producing signal. There is a difference between a signal and a broadcast. A broadcast is designed to reach as many people as possible. It optimizes for volume and reach. It compresses meaning to maximize distribution. A signal is what it is. It is the accurate output of a genuine source. It does not optimize for reach. It exists because the person who produced it has something real to transmit. You will not need to announce yourself when you have a genuine feather core. You will not need to manage your image, build your narrative, or curate your perception. Those are the strategies of people who do not trust their actual signal. The person who has done the interior work, who has built real architecture, simply produces, and the signal travels. You will have become the signal. That is the goal. Not to be seen, to be real. I want to bring this into something concrete. Your hours. Not your goals, not your vision board, not your affirmations, your actual hours. This week, not theoretically, not in the version of your life where things go according to plan. This actual week, the one you just lived, or the one you are about to live. Where did the hours go? Not the big hours, the small ones. The 15 minutes after waking, the 40 minutes after lunch, the hour before sleep, the 30 minutes in the car. Where did they go? Because here is the thing that the attention economy understood before most of us did. There is no such thing as neutral time. Every hour is being used by something. Either you are using it, deliberately, with intention, building towards something that actually matters to you, or it is being used by the scroll, by the recommendation algorithm, by the background noise of content that leaves you slightly more anxious and slightly less yourself than you were before you started. Attention is architecture. Say that slowly. Attention is architecture. Every hour you spend in deep, deliberate work on the things that matter to you builds your feather core. Literally, not metaphorically. The neural pathways that constitute your capacity, your focus, your originality, your judgment, your creative depth, those are built by the hours you give them, and they are degraded by the hours you give away. Every hour is building your feather core, or someone else's. The feed you scroll is not empty space. It is someone else's feather core, built on your attention, maintained by your hours, grown on the time you chose not to spend on your own work. This is not a moral argument. It is a structural one. You have a finite supply of attention. What you build with it is your life. The question is not whether you are building. You are always building. The question is what. I want to get specific about what actually builds the feather core, because the word ritual gets used loosely. Ice baths and journaling prompts and cold starts. I am not dismissing those things, but I want to talk about what actually constructs architecture, not what looks like it might. The rituals that build the feather core have one thing in common. They require genuine self-contact, not self-improvement, not self-optimization, self-contact. Actual, unmediated time with your own interior, with your own thoughts before they have been shaped by input, with your own reactions before they have been filtered by performance. Deep, undistracted work on something that actually matters to you. Not work on a to-do list, work on the real thing, the project you are actually trying to build, the question you are actually trying to answer, the problem that is genuinely yours to solve. An hour of this, genuinely uninterrupted, genuinely engaged, builds more architecture than a week of shallow productivity. Honest reflection without an audience. Not journaling for content, not recording yourself processing your thoughts. Private, honest accounting. What did I actually do this week? Not what I performed, what did I actually do? Where did I operate from my center, and where did I not? Not to punish, not to perform accountability, to know. Genuine self-knowledge is structural. Every honest reflection adds precision to your interior instrument. Physical stillness with interior attention. Not meditation as a productivity hack. Sitting with your own interior experience without escaping it. Whatever arises, discomfort, clarity, restlessness, insight, letting it be present without immediately reaching for a distraction. This is harder than it sounds. Most people have not sat with their own interior for 5 uninterrupted minutes in years. But this is the practice. This is how the gyroscope learns its own spin. These are the rituals, not because they make you feel good. Sometimes they do not, because they build real contact with yourself. And real contact with yourself, accumulated over time, is the feather core. The people of Kemet understood something about solitude that most modern conversations miss. In the temples of Kemet, the inner sanctuary, the sacred space at the center, was called the Holy of Holies. The further you moved into it, the fewer people could go. Not because it was exclusive in a social sense, because depth requires reduction of interference. The priests who tended the inner sanctuary went through purification rites, not symbolic rituals, actual preparation. The removal of what was not essential, the quieting of what was not central. Solitude, in the Kemetic understanding, was not absence, it was purification, a clearing away of accumulated interference so that the deep signal, the true self, the Maat at the center of your being, could be heard. This maps precisely onto what I mean by calibration. Most people's interior lives are loud, not with their own thoughts, with borrowed ones. The opinion someone expressed that you are still processing. The content you consumed that lodged somewhere in your nervous system and has been running in the background. The social comparison you made 2 days ago that is quietly reorienting your goals without your permission. That noise is not neutral. Every external input that has not been processed, sorted, and consciously integrated is occupying space in your interior. And the more of it there is, the harder it is to hear your own signal. Deliberate solitude is the process of clearing that. Not permanently, not in rejection of input, but regularly, systematically, as a practice of return. This is why the deep workers, the serious creators, the builders, the people producing genuinely original work, almost universally report that their best work comes from periods of genuine solitude. Not vacation, not distraction-free office time, actual, extended, interior solitude. Because in that solitude, the borrowed noise settles, and what is actually yours rises. Maat is not a passive state, it is maintained. The balance of the cosmos did not hold itself, it required constant, deliberate practice. The purification rituals of Kemet were not performed once, they were performed daily. Because the work of maintaining interior order is ongoing. Solitude is your daily purification. Not luxury, not escape, infrastructure. I want to tell you what life looks like from a genuine center, because I think most people have never seen it described clearly. And without that description, the goal remains abstract. Most people, when things get difficult, contract. The difficulty arrives, unexpected obstacle, external criticism, plan disruption, personal crisis, and the person becomes smaller. They become more reactive. They spend their energy managing their own anxiety rather than addressing the problem. The difficulty depletes them. A person with a built feather cord does the opposite. When difficulty arrives, they expand. Not because they are unaffected, not because they have suppressed their response, but because they have a center to return to. The difficulty does not move the center, it clarifies it. This is the gyroscope effect. The harder the push, the more stable the axis. The person with a genuine feather core brings a quality to every situation that most environments have never experienced. Unhurried clarity. In a culture of urgency and reactivity, the person who is genuinely unrushable, not as a pose, not as a performance of cool, but as a structural property of who they are, changes every room they walk into. Not by announcing themselves, by being present from a center. Other people feel this, even when they cannot name it. There is something qualitatively different about being in proximity to a person who is operating from genuine interiority rather than from performance or reaction. It is not charisma in the ordinary sense, it is gravity. Real centers of gravity attract, not by trying, not by projecting, by simply existing at a density that other people have not encountered often. This is what the people of Kemet meant when they built toward eternity. Not that the structures would last forever, though many have, but that the work was done from a center that was not subject to the urgencies of the moment. The monuments of Kemet were not built in reaction to anything. They were built from an interior architecture that had already solved the question of permanence. When you have built your feather core, genuinely built it, not performed it, not posted about it, not told people about your morning routine, you do not move through chaos hoping to survive it. You move through chaos and it organizes around you. Not because you are powerful in the way the world currently defines power, because you have a center, and most things do not. You will have become the storm, quiet at the center, moving everything around you. Let me close with this. The world is not going to become less loud. The attention economy is not going to slow down. The infrastructure of destruction is not going to be dismantled. The forces competing for your orientation, your time, your attention, your identity, they are not going to retreat. So the question is never whether the pressure is there. The question is whether you have something to press against. The feather core is that something. Not a fortress, not a wall, a center. The kind of center that, when pressure is applied, stabilizes rather than shatters. That when the world offers you a reason to become something other than what you are, responds not with resistance, but with gravity. Because you know what you are. And knowing what you are is not a small thing in a world designed to keep you uncertain. Here is what I want you to sit with. The hours you spend building your inner architecture are not separate from your life. They are not stolen from your productivity, your relationships, your ambitions. They are the foundation that makes everything else coherent. Every hour of genuine self-contact, real solitude, deep work, honest reflection is an act of construction. Attention is architecture, and you are building something. The question is only whether what you are building is yours. The people of Kemet weighed the heart against the feather of Maat. Not the resume, not the wealth, not the visibility. The heart, the interior life, the depth of the person, what they actually were beneath what they presented. That judgment has always been the real one. Not what you accumulated, what you became. When you have built a genuine feather core, when you have put in the real time, done the real interior work, built real contact with yourself, you will not need to announce it. You will not need to curate a narrative around it. You will not need others to confirm it, because the signal does not need amplification. It simply travels. You will not have become louder. You will have become more real. And in a world that is almost entirely noise, reality is the rarest thing there is. You have become the signal. Build the feather